The air in the belly of the Starlight Trader was thick with the smells of ozone, cold salt, and weeping steel. It was a cathedral of rust and engineering, and it was my church. Young Mark, my junior surveyor, held his tablet up, the green glow illuminating his earnest, worried face. "The scans are clear, Lena," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous ballast tank. "Grid pattern shows hull integrity is at 97%. Within spec." I ignored the tablet. I had my own scanner. It was the palm of my gloved hand, which I pressed flat against the transverse bulkhead at frame 114. I closed my eyes. The ship spoke to me, not in words, but in vibrations. In the deep, resonant hum of the generators, there was a faint, discordant hiss, a tiny, insistent lie. Metal under stress doesn't scream, it whispers. You just have to know how to listen. I opened my eyes and pulled a piece of chalk from my pocket, drawing a neat circle on the cold steel. "Here," I said, my voice flat. "The tablet is reading the surface tension. It can't hear what's happening underneath. Get the ultrasonic out. There's a hairline fracture starting behind the primary weld seam. Laminar corrosion is pulling it apart from the inside out." Mark looked from the tablet to my chalk mark, his faith in technology warring with his faith in me. Faith in me won. It always did. 25 years of listening to ships. My office wasn't the corner suite on the 32nd floor. It was a modest, windowed room that smelled faintly of smoky Lapsang Souchong tea. On my desk sat three things: a photograph of the icebreaker Academic Fedorov, whose impossibly complex hull I had certified, a meticulously pruned juniper bonsai that was older than most of my colleagues, and the thermos that held my tea. It was a sanctuary of precision in a world that was increasingly drawn to loud, imprecise men. The watch on my wrist was a simple steel diver's model, a gift from a captain whose tanker I grounded off the coast of Norway, forcing a dry dock for an engine mount I knew was about to shear off. He'd told me I saved his ship and his crew of 32 men. The watch didn't just tell time, it reminded me what time was for. My authority wasn't granted by a title. It was earned in the dark and damp places of the world. It was built into the code of my proprietary acoustic resonance scan, the ARS, a system I designed after the Oceanos disaster. It didn't just look at metal, it listened to its crystalline structure. It was my intellectual property, on loan to the Global Maritime Authority. My signature on a certificate wasn't just my name, it was a guarantee, backed by physics and a quarter-century of being right. He had no idea what he was really trying to steal. He thought it was just a signature. Giles Maro arrived on a Tuesday. He didn't walk into the GMA boardroom, he infested it. He was 32, with the soft, unlined face of a man who had never been told no, and the aggressive posture of someone who suspected he should have been. His suit was offensively new. His shoes, a pair of $1,000 Italian leather monstrosities, had never felt the kiss of grated steel or the bite of rust. His presentation was a masterpiece of corporate nonsense, a visual assault of PowerPoint slides filled with words like synergy, paradigm shift, and disruption. He wanted to actionize our agile certification verticals. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I was fairly certain it was stupid. I sat in the back, sipping my tea, and observed. He stumbled over the word ballast, calling it ballast. A man in charge of maritime safety who couldn't pronounce the most basic term. It was perfect. The small insults started the next day, the little paper cuts of corporate warfare, an invitation to a critical logistics meeting that somehow never made it to my inbox, a casual reference to my team of expert surveyors as the boiler room crew. His favorite tactic was public condescension. In a full planning meeting, he put on a show of magnanimous curiosity. "Now, Lena," he began, his voice oozing a sickly sweetness, "for those of us who aren't quite so technical, can you explain to the board in very simple terms why a big boat needs to be, strong?" The room went quiet. I met his gaze. His eyes were empty. There was nothing behind them but ambition and the reflection of his father's money. "Ships need to be strong, Giles," I said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "so they don't break. When they break, people die. Is that simple enough for you?" He smiled, but a small muscle in his jaw twitched. I had made a note of it. The real conflict, the inciting incident of my quiet life's unraveling, arrived in an email. Subject 5-year certification inspection, the Maro legacy, his family's flagship. An aging rust bucket with a proud name and a tired hull. The battleground had been chosen. He thought it was his. The ARS scan of the Maro legacy was not a report, it was a cry for help. The data showed significant hull degradation, pockets of advanced corrosion masked by fresh paint, and maintenance logs that were more fiction than fact. The ship was a disaster waiting for a storm. I did my job. I submitted my report, recommending a conditional pass, contingent on immediate and extensive dry dock repairs. Giles responded by convening an emergency board meeting. He didn't want to discuss my findings. He wanted to execute my reputation. He stood before the board, a magnificent photograph of the Maro legacy at sunset projected behind him. He looked like a leader. He sounded like a leader. But he was just a boy playing with words he didn't understand. "This is our flagship," he said, his voice resonating with false gravity. "A symbol of our commitment to global commerce. Miss Hanson, however," he said, turning to me, his lips curling into a pitying smile, "believes it's on the verge of collapse. She has submitted a report filled with paranoia." He let the word hang in the air. Paranoia. "Perhaps her experience," he continued, pausing to let the insult land, "is causing her to see problems where there are only opportunities for efficiency. She is a relic from an analog age, slowing down progress with meticulous, unnecessary fear-mongering." I looked around the table. The old guard, men I had known for decades, shifted uncomfortably. But the new board members, the ones who spoke Giles's language of disruption and optimization, they nodded. They saw me as he did, a bug in the code of progress, an obstacle. He formally tabled a motion to override my assessment and grant the Maro legacy a full, unrestricted certification. And the board, swayed by his empty promises and the sheer force of his inherited confidence, voted yes. I sat in stunned silence. It wasn't just a professional disagreement. It was a public humiliation. He hadn't just overruled my report. He had taken my 25 years of work, my expertise, my very identity, and dismissed it as the ramblings of a paranoid old woman. In that silent, polished boardroom, my fury began to cool, to harden. It was changing from a hot, messy emotion into something cold, clear, and perfectly geometric. That night, I did not rage. I did not despair. I went home to my quiet, orderly house and walked into my study. I unlocked a heavy, fireproof filing cabinet. It was my personal archive, my life's work. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a heavy, leather-bound copy of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, the SOLAS Convention. I had been on the subcommittee that drafted the addendums after the Oceano sank, a disaster caused by corporate negligence and a surveyor who had been pressured into signing off on a faulty ship. We were determined it would never happen again. My fingers, so accustomed to tracing the lines of steel, now traced the lines of text. I knew what I was looking for. My fingers stopped. Article 11.3. A clause I had personally authored, a piece of bureaucratic poetry that no one ever read. It specified that any certificate of classification is considered valid only if the signing surveyor remains in active good standing with the issuing authority. Termination of the surveyor's employment automatically renders every certificate they have personally signed in the past 12 months provisionally invalid and subject to immediate reinspection. I had built this system with one hidden feature, a failsafe, a poison pill designed to protect a surveyor from exactly the kind of corporate pressure Giles Maro represented. I had never imagined I would be the one to use it. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. The path forward was illuminated. I could not quit. Quitting was surrender. The system required a different input. For the clause to activate, my employment had to be terminated. My objective was no longer to save the Maro legacy. It was to get fired. The next morning, I began my campaign. I became a master of malicious compliance. I was polite. I was professional. I was utterly, infuriatingly immovable. My communications became works of art. Every email was a meticulously documented, cross-referenced, and legally airtight masterpiece. Every single one had a carbon copy sent to the GMA's legal counsel. I was creating a paper trail so dense, so perfect, that it would be Giles's coffin. I red flagged 2 more Maro ships, one for a minor ballast water management system discrepancy, another for an out-of-date fire suppression certificate. They were small things that could have been fixed with a phone call. Instead, I initiated a full formal review process, burying Giles's office in forms A7 through C12. Each form I filed was a small, quiet moment of satisfaction. I was using the system he despised to choke him. What he didn't understand was that bureaucracy for him was a nuisance. For me, it was a weapon system. He wanted to move fast and break things, but I was the one who had written the rules that governed how things were broken. The final piece of the trap was my official, final report on the Maro legacy. Since the board had overridden my recommendation, my signature was still required. I wrote the most elegant, technically detailed, and legally damning report of my career. I outlined every single flaw in the ship's hull, citing precise ARS data, metallurgical decay rates, and potential failure points under standard barometric pressure changes in the North Atlantic. I concluded the report with a simple, devastating sentence. While this surveyor's professional recommendation has been overridden by the board, my signature on this certificate is a matter of protocol, not endorsement. To grant this vessel an unrestricted certificate is not a calculated risk, but a willful disregard for the lives of its crew and the integrity of the global maritime authority. I signed it, uploaded it to the system, and sent a printed copy directly to Giles's desk. It was a poison pill, a legal shield for me and a ticking bomb for him. All he had to do was light the fuse. He took less than an hour. The door to my office slammed open. Giles Maro stood there, his face a mask of crimson rage. He was holding my report, his knuckles white. "This!" he screamed, shaking the papers. "This is insubordination. This is a direct attack." "It's a report, Giles," I said calmly, not looking up from my work. "It's my job. Your job is to do what you're told. Your job is to facilitate commerce, not to be an obstacle." He stalked toward my desk. He saw my bonsai, my 20 years of patient, careful work. With a swipe of his arm, he sent it crashing to the floor. The ceramic pot shattered. The ancient roots lay exposed. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're done. Finished. Get your ancient things out of my building. You are terminated, effective immediately." I looked at the wreckage of my little tree on the floor. Then I looked up at him. My expression was perfectly blank. This was the moment, the input the system was waiting for. "Thank you, Giles," I said, my voice soft. "I'll need that in writing." The look on his face when he realized his fatal error was something I will cherish for the rest of my life. He didn't understand the significance of the words, not yet, but he sensed that in his moment of supposed triumph, he had just handed me the keys to his own destruction. I packed my desk calmly. I took the photo of the icebreaker. I gently gathered the remains of my bonsai. I left the thermos. The next morning, the world began to end for Giles Maro. It started with a single email from a junior lawyer in the compliance department, performing a routine exit protocol check. The email, flagged urgent, contained a single question. Has anyone on the board reviewed SOLAS Convention, Article 11.3.b? From there, the cascade was swift, brutal, and beautiful. I watched his world collapse in real time, from the comfort of my own home, with a fresh pot of lapsang souchong. The news alerts started hitting my phone. Global shipping giant Maro Lines faces unprecedented fleet stoppage. Insurance underwriters panic as GMA certifications, suddenly invalidated. Ports from Singapore to Rotterdam deny entry to Maro vessels. Over 300 ships across the globe, every single vessel whose certificate bore my signature from the last 12 months, were now floating liabilities. And that included the entire operational fleet of Maro Lines. His family's stock price didn't just drop, it fell off a cliff. My phone rang. It was the chairman of the board. His voice was tight with panic. He asked me if I would be willing to come in and consult. I named a consulting fee that was purposefully obscene. He agreed without a moment's hesitation. I walked into the same boardroom where I had been humiliated. This time, all eyes were on me. Giles was there, sitting at the end of the table. He was pale, shrunken. His expensive suit looked like a costume. I didn't shout. I didn't recriminate. I stood at the head of the table and I taught a class. Article 11.3.b, I began, my voice clear and steady, was designed as a final safeguard for the integrity of this authority. It ensures that a surveyor cannot be pressured or fired by corporate interests to silence a safety concern. It links the validity of the work directly to the professional standing of the person who performed it. I looked directly at Giles. You saw my signature as a bureaucratic hurdle, a rubber stamp you could bully into submission. You failed to understand that it is the foundation upon which this entire industry's trust is built. My signature is not my name. It is a promise that a ship is safe. By terminating me to silence me, you didn't just fire a surveyor. You detonated a legal bomb at the heart of your own company. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. I had used his own ignorance, his own arrogance as the trigger for his demise. He was professionally annihilated. The board removed him before the meeting was even over. His own family ousted him later that day to appease the insurers. He wasn't just fired, he was erased. The board didn't just offer me my old job back. They understood now. They needed more than a surveyor. They needed a conscience. They created a new C-suite position, effective immediately, Chief Officer for Maritime Integrity. It came with oversight of the entire certification process and a seat on the board. His seat. My new office is on the corner of the 32nd floor. It has a view of the entire harbor. A new juniper bonsai, older and more intricate than the last, sits on the wide windowsill, basking in the afternoon sun. I am sipping my lapsang souchong tea, watching a live feed on my monitor. It's from a dry dock in Hamburg. The ship on the blocks is the Maro Legacy. Teams of my surveyors are swarming over it, cutting away the plates of its rusted, weakened hull. They are undoing Giles's lie with blowtorches and steel. My assistant buzzes on the intercom. Ma'am, the board has unanimously approved your first directive. Thank you, Sarah, I say. My first directive was simple. A full mandatory reinspection of every single ship whose certification was fast-tracked or influenced by Giles Maro. The cleanup had begun. I leaned back in my chair, the warm ceramic of the teacup in my hands. I watched the workers on the screen peeling back the skin of the Maro Legacy, revealing the decay beneath. It is a deeply, intimately satisfying sight. He wanted to call me a relic from an analog age. He was right. I believe in things you can touch. I believe in integrity, in experience, and in the simple physical fact that some things, if you let them, will break. And some people, if you push them, will break you right back. The old standard had been compromised. A new one had to be set. I looked out at the ships moving slowly across the harbor, their paths crossing in a complex, beautiful dance. They were all my responsibility now. I was no longer just maintaining the standard. I was the standard.